In the grand ballroom of Amberstone Hotel, the lights cast a soft glow. Hundreds of guests gathered, eager to witness Emma and Lucas exchange vows. It was a wedding everyone envied. Their story appeared flawless, a love story straight from a dream. Emma looked stunning, the ivory gown shimmering with her every step. She walked down the aisle, each step heavy with secrets. Her heart raced with dread, not joy. Beneath her serene smile, anxiety twisted in her stomach. Lucas, standing at the altar, looked at her with absolute devotion. He had given everything to make this day unforgettable. For 5 years, they had been each other's world. They survived long distance, family disapproval, and countless struggles. Lucas believed he'd finally reached the fairy tale ending. He had spared no expense, making the day a tribute to their love. But Emma carried a secret, one that weighed heavily on her. Her glances kept shifting to a shadowy figure near the exit. That figure was Ryan, her lover. Their affair had been a forbidden escape from reality. She had met Ryan months ago. His dark, mysterious energy had drawn her in like a magnet. While Lucas was dependable and loyal, Ryan was wild and dangerous. He was everything Lucas was not. Emma thought she could walk away from Ryan. She convinced herself she'd end it after the wedding. But Ryan wouldn't let her go. He showed up today, uninvited, with a sly, knowing smile. As the officiant began the ceremony, tension filled the air. Emma's hands grew clammy, her heart pounding. She felt Ryan's gaze burning through the crowd. The intensity of his stare made her feel trapped. Lucas was oblivious, lost in his love for her. He saw only his future wife, the woman he'd vowed to cherish. But for Emma, each vow cut deeper into her guilt. She knew her double life could unravel at any second. Then, the question echoed through the ballroom, does anyone object to this union? Silence settled heavily. Emma held her breath, hoping Ryan would stay silent. She prayed he'd let her move on with Lucas. But Ryan had other plans. He stepped forward, his voice strong and clear. I object. Gasps rippled through the guests. Heads turned, faces twisted in shock. Emma's heart sank. She glanced at Lucas, whose smile faltered as confusion crossed his face. The officiant looked uncertain, glancing between Ryan and the couple. On what grounds? He asked cautiously. Ryan's eyes locked onto Emma's. This woman has been lying to you, he declared, his voice hedged with satisfaction. Lucas froze, disbelief painted across his face. Emma felt her stomach drop, the moment of truth upon her. The guests began to murmur, shocked whispers filling the room. Emma felt the weight of their judgment. Lucas turned to her, his face a mask of hurt and confusion. Is it true? He whispered. Tears filled Emma's eyes as she struggled to respond. She nodded, her voice caught in her throat. It was a mistake, she managed, her voice trembling. But Lucas wasn't satisfied. How long? He demanded, his tone hardening. Emma hesitated, then whispered, 6 months. Lucas looked shattered. 6 months, he repeated, barely able to comprehend. Ryan stepped forward, his expression smug. She wasn't just with me, he added with satisfaction. The room erupted into chaos. Guests murmured, shock and disgust filling their faces. Lucas's face twisted in agony, betrayal ripping through him. His fists clenched, his body trembling with rage. Emma tried to reach out, to explain, but he recoiled. The damage was done. Ryan smirked, his mission accomplished. He looked at Lucas, relishing the devastation he'd caused. Lucas lunged at him, his anger boiling over. A fight erupted, chairs clattering, guests shouting. Friends pulled Lucas back, restraining him. But his gaze never left Emma, filled with hurt. Emma stood, frozen, surrounded by the chaos she had created. Her perfect day lay in ruins. Guests began to leave, horrified by the scandal. Emma felt the weight of their stares as they passed. The fairy tale was over. She was left alone, her choices laid bare for all to see. The ballroom, once beautiful, now felt cold and empty. Emma was a broken figure amidst the wreckage. The reality of her betrayal hung in the air, impossible to escape. Emma realized she had gambled everything and lost. In the end, she stood as the symbol of what happens when secrets come to light. Emma forced a smile. Thank you, Lucas. Her voice wavered, but she tried to steady it, keeping her eyes away from the crowd, and away from him. The officiant's voice droned in the background. Emma's hands shook slightly as she clutched her bouquet tighter, her eyes darting to a shadowy figure near the back. "Ryan." Lucas noticed her distraction. "Emma, are you all right?" he whispered, his brows furrowing with concern. She swallowed hard. Yes, I'm fine." But her gaze slipped toward Ryan again. He was watching her, arms crossed, a smirk playing at his lips. As the vows began, Emma's mind spiraled. "This is it," she thought. "I just have to get through this, and everything will be fine." But Ryan's eyes held a silent threat, a promise to disrupt her carefully constructed world. She knew he was capable of anything, and today, of all days, terrified her. The officiant's voice echoed through the ballroom. "If anyone here knows a reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace." A tense silence blanketed the room. Lucas squeezed Emma's hand reassuringly, smiling, completely unsuspecting. But Emma's heart raced as she felt Ryan's gaze boring into her. She silently pleaded, "Please, just leave." The silence stretched a second too long, and then Ryan's voice cut through. "I object." A collective gasp rippled through the guests, eyes darting from Emma to Ryan in shock. Emma felt the ground tilt beneath her as her heart thundered in her chest. Lucas's face went pale. "What?" His hand slipped from hers, confusion and hurt darkening his eyes. The officiant looked from Emma to Ryan, clearly unsettled. "On what grounds do you object?" he asked carefully. Ryan took a deliberate step forward, locking eyes with Emma. His smirk faded, replaced by something darker. "This woman," he said, pointing at her, "is a liar." "Ryan, stop." Emma's voice was barely more than a whisper, but panic twisted through her words. She could feel every gaze in the room turn to her. Lucas, still reeling, asked quietly, "Emma, is this true?" Emma's breath caught, and her face went pale. "Lucas, she swallowed, her voice breaking. "It was a mistake." "A mistake?" Ryan scoffed. "You didn't seem to think that last week." His tone was dripping with contempt. Lucas looked stricken, his eyes pleading. "Emma, how long?" Her voice barely registered above the murmurs around them. 6 months. Lucas staggered back, like he'd been struck. 6 months. His voice cracked. "We were supposed to be planning our lives together, and you were, with him." Emma tried to reach for him, her voice trembling. "I thought I could walk away. I thought." Ryan interrupted, his face dark with anger and satisfaction. "You weren't walking away from anything. Don't lie to him now, Emma. He deserves the truth." Lucas's expression hardened as he stared at Emma, his eyes dark with betrayal. "Was any of this real?" he whispered. Emma's voice shook as tears filled her eyes. "Lucas, I love you." "Enough." Lucas's shout echoed through the ballroom. He backed away, fists clenched, eyes flashing with pain and anger. I can't do this." Suddenly, he lunged at Ryan, his rage boiling over. Friends and family jumped to pull them apart as chaos erupted. Emma stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, watching helplessly as her world fell apart. The guests looked on, horrified, as her secret lay bare for everyone to see. The once lavish ballroom now felt cold and exposed. Emma was left alone at the altar, surrounded by the consequences of her own choices, as the whispers of disbelief and disgust grew around her. As the ballroom emptied, Emma stood alone, her world unraveling at her feet. She could still hear the murmurs, the disbelief of family and friends, and Lucas's voice breaking as he stormed away. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling small beneath the grandeur of the chandeliered hall. But in the quiet that followed, a gentle voice broke the silence. "Emma." She turned, expecting to see an angry or disappointed face, but instead, it was her friend, Sarah. Sarah walked over, her expression full of warmth and understanding. "Sarah?" Emma's voice cracked, and she dropped her gaze, ashamed. Sarah put an arm around her. "Hey, come sit. I think you need someone right now." Emma allowed Sarah to guide her to a small lounge area just outside the ballroom. They sat in silence for a few moments, Emma struggling to find words to express the storm inside her. Finally, Sarah spoke. "You're human, Emma, you made a mistake, a big one, sure, but that doesn't mean you're beyond forgiveness. Emma shook her head. But Lucas, I hurt him so badly. He looked at me like he didn't even know me. Sarah took her hand. Maybe he needs time, but you have to give him that, and give yourself some time, too. Running from this won't help. You have to face it. Emma swallowed, feeling the weight of Sarah's words. She knew that running was what had gotten her here in the first place. She'd run from her own doubts, buried herself in a life that felt like a fairy tale from the outside, but with secrets she was too afraid to confront. I don't even know if he'll talk to me again, she whispered, almost to herself. Then you have to do the one thing you've been avoiding, Sarah said. Tell him everything, not in a crowded ballroom, not with all those people watching, just you and him. Emma nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. She didn't know if Lucas would ever forgive her, but she knew she owed him the truth. She owed him the chance to ask anything he needed, and she owed herself the chance to truly be honest. The next evening, Emma found herself in front of Lucas's apartment, a bundle of nerves and uncertainty. She raised her hand to knock, then hesitated, swallowing the fear in her throat. Taking a deep breath, she knocked softly. After a moment, Lucas opened the door, his face unreadable. He looked tired, hurt, but he didn't close the door. Lucas, her voice came out barely above a whisper. Please, can we talk? He stared at her for a long moment before stepping aside, letting her in. They walked to the small kitchen, where they'd spent countless nights cooking together, laughing, sharing quiet moments. The space felt heavy with memories. They sat across from each other, the silence thick. Finally, Lucas broke it. Why, Emma? His voice was raw. Why him? Why did you do this to us? Emma took a shaky breath, trying to find the right words. I was afraid, Lucas. Afraid of everything. The pressure, the expectations. I started feeling like I was just disappearing. Lucas's eyes searched her face, hurt still evident but softened by a glimmer of understanding. Ryan was an escape from everything I felt suffocated by, she continued. I wanted something reckless, something that made me feel alive. But it was a mistake, a horrible mistake that I can never take back. Lucas's gaze dropped to his hands. So, was any of it real? Us? Emma reached out, her hand trembling as it brushed his. Yes, Lucas, I loved you, and I still do. I know it's hard to believe, but I never wanted to hurt you. He was silent for a while, and Emma felt the weight of her words settle over them. She braced herself for his anger, his rejection. But then, he sighed, a deep, tired sigh. You're right about one thing, he said slowly. We've both been under a lot of pressure. And maybe I didn't see how much you were struggling. Lucas, don't blame yourself, Emma said softly, her heart aching. This was my fault. I should have talked to you. I should have trusted you enough to share how I was feeling. Lucas nodded, sadness etched in his face. Maybe, but I guess I thought if I could just make everything perfect, you'd feel as happy as I did. Maybe I was trying to hold on too tightly. They both sat quietly, letting the truth sink in. Emma realized that for the first time, they were talking honestly, with no expectations, no fairy tale script, just the raw truth between them. After a long silence, Lucas spoke. Emma, I don't know if I can forgive you right away. I need time, but I also need to believe that this is something we can work through, if you're willing to try. Emma's heart lifted, cautiously. I am. I'll do whatever it takes. I just want to be honest, finally, to build something real with you. Lucas took a deep breath, and she could see the conflict in his eyes slowly softening. Then we'll take it one day at a time. Months passed, and Emma and Lucas worked tirelessly to rebuild what was broken. They didn't rush. There were no grand gestures, just small steps, conversations, counseling sessions, moments of honesty that deepened their understanding of each other. They learned to let go of perfection, embracing the flaws and challenges they faced together. One warm spring day, they found themselves back at Amberstone Hotel, not for a wedding but for a simple dinner. The past was still there, lingering, but it no longer held the same power over them. As they walked through the ballroom, Memories surfaced, but this time, they faced them together. Lucas took her hand, and she looked up, meeting his steady gaze. "Are you ready to build something new?" he asked, a gentle smile on his face. Emma nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. Yes, this time, something real. They stood in that quiet ballroom, where so much had fallen apart, and promised each other that, no matter what came next, they would face it with honesty, patience, and love. And in that moment, Emma knew they were stronger, not in spite of their past but because they had chosen to rebuild.